one comment from a 2018 radio interview where you called the European Union leadership the political diplomatic enemies of the United States of America. That's a direct quote. Now, if confirmed, you would lead the American presence in an EU country where Russian and Chinese influence demand our full attention, and where out of the 27 EU member states, 23 are our NATO allies, including Slovakia. So how do you explain that, and how will you explain that to the European leadership and officials that you would have to deal with if you are confirmed in this position?
Yeah, thank you for that good question, Senator. I appreciate it. Yeah, that's 8 years ago, and the dynamics between the United States and the EU leadership has shifted quite a bit. Back then, there was a considerable hostility between American interests and American first policy and the EU response. In particular, what triggered that response was hearing then the leader of the EU, he was a spokesman from Italy, I forget his name, basically saying that the EU won World War II and the United States and Great Britain had nothing to do with it. Nigel Farage, of course, who was still a member of the EU Parliament, stood up and corrected the record. That was the kind of leadership we were facing at the time. There was resistance to increasing the NATO budget. There was resistance to American interests in economic aid to the region. But my record shows that I have worked well with them across the world. I've had no problem. In fact, I have deep connections, both today even, in the civil leadership and the military leadership across Western, Central, and Northern Europe?
Well, I was on this committee and in the United States Senate in 2018, and I didn't view the leadership of Europe as political and diplomatic enemies of the United States. And I don't think that approach was helpful then. I don't think it's helpful now. And I understand that you told the staff when you were being interviewed that you believe the EU is a rising rival, I quote, comparable to China, and that it would eventually create a standing army to challenge the United States. Is that what you believe? Do you really believe that?
It is clearly a goal of EU leadership. I'm a senator, I should know to press that button. It is the goal of the stated leadership of the EU, and they've been desirous of building their own EU army since 2002, when I was a planner in U.S. Army headquarters, Europe. And,
they have talked about. I have been in those discussions as well, Mr. Mastriano, sure. And I can tell you that nobody ever suggested that would be in lieu of the United States or in lieu of NATO and the cooperative effort that we have with our allies. And I can tell you that it was the NATO allies who came to our defense when we got attacked on 9/11. The only time Article 5 has been invoked.
I served with them in Afghanistan, side by side.
And so you should know better than to make those comments.
Especially lately, we're hearing more arguments out of the latest debate come from the EU that they want to have capability beyond the America, not to rely upon American readiness.
Well, and I can understand why, given some of the attacks from people like you in the United States that you've made against the EU.
I regret that mischaracterization, because my view is we do work better together. And I have served and bled on the battlefields with NATO allies for more than 30 years in my career, and I understand the importance of this alliance. But I don't want to see this most successful alliance in the history of the world, NATO, to fade away or be overshadowed by an EU army. I think that undercuts our international interests.
I haven't heard anybody at NATO suggesting that that's going to happen. So I think you're absolutely right. We do work better when we work together and we cooperate. And I would think somebody who served on the battlefield with those countries would know better than to make those kinds of statements. And I can tell you, as a diplomat representing the United States of America, you should absolutely know better.
Mr. Chairman, if I could respond,
if I could
please.
go on to Mr. Blaum. Lebanon is really at a critical turning point right now. I'm encouraged that there are direct negotiations between Lebanon and Israel. I think that's been long overdue. But one of the significant factors in ensuring that we can see peace ultimately in Lebanon, I think, is support for the Lebanese armed forces. So can you talk about whether you think, how important you think it is to continue to support the LAF?
Thanks for that question, Senator. Absolutely an important element of our negotiations, or of our facilitation of the negotiations between Israel and Lebanon, is that support for the LAF. The LAF has played an important role in counterterrorism and border security, all with the assistance of the United States. That's not to diminish that, there are issues with the LAF that we have to address, difficult issues. But the extent to which we're able to make progress on finding a way to replace Hezbollah in Lebanon and create a new future free of foreign domination in that country runs in some way through the LAF as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Scott.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Priss, what are some of your top priorities when you get this job, and what's success look like at the end of your time there?
Well, thank you, Senator, for that question, and thank you for the very kind introduction and your continued friendship. I would break them down into three different priorities. I would say first would be the security of the United States and all of the Americans that live inside of the United States, but it's not just those that live here in the mainland. I would say the employees that work and that serve this country in Brazil. It's my understanding we have a little over 1,000 employees that work within the American Embassy in Brazil, and their security is just as important to me as us here as we sit here today. Second would be diplomacy. I think there's a huge opportunity for us to increase diplomatic relationships with Brazil. We obviously have an election in Brazil that is upcoming here in the first week of October, and regardless of what that election shows, there's an opportunity for us to bridge that gap, and I believe I have the right skill set to be able to do that, assuming I get the opportunity to serve. And the last one would be trade. And we do have a trade surplus with Brazil, but nevertheless, and Senator Ricketts alluded to this earlier, there are some industries that have a significant gap. It's not just ethanol. I would say we have a problem in energy. Agriculture is a massive problem for us, specifically the beef trade between the United States and Brazil. And if confirmed, those are the three priorities that I will be focusing on as soon as I am able to hit the ground.
Thank you. Mr. Mastriano, after the conclusion of the most recent NATO summit in Ankara, the Slovakian Prime Minister reiterated that they would not contribute to NATO's $70 billion military aid package for Ukraine, or the EU's $90 billion euro military loan. He has requested that he favors dialogue with Russia, but his approach completely misunderstands what negotiations actually requires leverage. So the only way to create, in my opinion, real leverage over the Kremlin is to ensure Ukraine has the support it needs. So tell me how you're going to navigate this.
Thank you, Senator, for that good question.